Mohammad, welcome to AU Manufacturing Conversations. Thank you very much for being on the program.
Great to be on your program.
The first question for you, as it is for all our guests, is how did you get here and what do you make?
How did I get here? Well, I was appointed as the CEO of Archer back in 2017 by the executive chairman, Greg English. And what we make at Archer, we make advanced semiconductor devices that are relevant to quantum technology and medical diagnostics. So I guess the key there is advanced chips. We build and develop these amazing technologies at the limit of what can be achieved today.
We'll return to these amazing bits of chip-based technology later. For the time being, could you please sort of give us a little bit of a sketch of your career and your life and times? Tell us about the journey from, I guess, getting interested in science to getting interested in graphene to getting interested in commercializing a very, very difficult thing that is quantum technology.
No worries. I mean, the good thing about this is that I don't have to turn the clock back too much because I like to think of myself as not being too old just yet, right? So I can take you back, quite quickly to the early days. I was interested in science from an early age. I was quite curious. I was curious about things came together. And when I say things, I don't mean people or organizations. I meant, the atoms that make us all up. Just amazing. I just thought there's an intricacy, there's a detail there that I just didn't really fully understand, and I wanted to understand it. And the word understanding is very important for me because as I was growing up, I had a really poor memory. I remember speaking to my science teacher when I was a kid. I remember saying to him, I have a poor memory, right? I can't memorize this stuff. A lot of other kids can memorize these things. And I remember him saying to me, Mohammad, if you understand something, you don't need to memorize it. And that's really what drove me into science because I felt as though there was so much to understand and there was less required of me to memorize. So it meant that you could spend your time working on problems where you can derive things from first principles and you can really truly solve problems that had a significant impact on a lot of people, on a lot of technologies, on a lot of things that we use day to day. And this kind of drew me into the nanotechnology aspect of my background in technology and science. And at the time, this was over a decade ago, nanotech was just emerging, right? So not many universities offered a degree like nanotechnology. And I was fortunate to enroll in a degree in nanotechnology at UNSW here in Sydney. I was born in Sydney. I was bred in Sydney. And it was, a fantastic degree. And it was multidisciplinary. So you got a bit of everything and you got to specialize in something at the end of it. And for me, it was a decision to, do you make the technologies or do you make the materials that go into the technologies? And I decided that there was still a lot to do in the materials that go into technology, especially as you go towards the atom scale. And that was over a decade ago. At the time, no one knew what graphene was. And there was an interest for me in trying to develop chemical pathways to carbon-based materials, very special materials. We're all made of carbon. In doing so, it led to me discovering a way, the first way, to chemically produce graphene, a single atom thick material for the first time without having to use graphite. The person who found graphene by peeling away graphite in the Ocelot, he ended up winning the Nobel Prize.
Indeed, he was using Scotch tape, was he not?
Yeah, it was a Scotch tape method. Good on him, right? They did that over in Manchester. But I think at the time, it was only him and 2 or 3 others that had published work on the topic. And I remember that we had submitted a patent at the time, patent application, that was just titled graphene. I mean, it was a one-word title. And the work subsequently was published in Nature Nanotechnology, and Nature is being a very prestigious journal. And it was a massive door opener for me. But at the same time, I moved straight from an undergraduate degree to a PhD in chemistry. And I think I was quite young. And at the same time, I had an interest in business. I always wanted to translate the science to public good. I always wanted to find a way to translate the work economically, make a positive economic impact on the lives of many people. So I was, at the same time as a PhD, doing a degree in research commercialization in the business school there at UNSW. So yeah, I spent a lot of time at universities, postdoc overseas in Italy in the physics department in Parma. Was a fellow at Sydney University. I think I was 26 or 27, and I was invited to join the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Advanced Materials. That was a wonderful experience as well. I served a 2-year mandate there, and here I am at Archer. I mean, it's been interesting to say the least.
And a story still being written, as you are, just as you said, a young man, and you don't have to go back very far to tell the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. I think we've done some really fantastic things at Archer over the last few years. We've grown tremendously, and I think we're doing something fantastic in Australia as well. And if you get a chance to meet the people at Archer and the people driving our development and its growth, you'll see that, you know, in some way or another, they've come through the Australian system, and they've all had the opportunity now to really translate their knowledge into very valuable concepts and very valuable, potentially valuable technologies that I hope that we could talk about today.
Right, we will get to them, but you mentioned your team. I'd like to know a little more, please, about the size of Archer, some of the talented people that make it up, and some of the outside collaborators, because those are always important also.
Yeah, we're about 20 people at Archer, and so we tend to take the pick of the crop, right? So we take very, very talented people. We're not about quantity, we're about quality, and the people we have are absolutely brilliant in what they do. They excel in their respective art and craft. So, you know, we have people who, for example, invented the single atom transistor. You have people who were the early pioneers in photonics, quantum photonic measurements, and you have people who have designed devices that have been world first. You know, an amazing group of people ranging from people who have spent 30 years in the semiconductor industry. You have engineers, nanofab scientists, you have theoreticians, you know, physicists, chemists, biologists, absolutely. You know, if you took STEM, you would just be able to label everyone at Archer with one of those letters in that acronym, right? So it's a wonderful group of high achievers, really, really talented people, and a team that I believe can rival any in the world.
So I'd like to go back a little bit, but not too far, and I'd like to learn a little more, please, about your breakthrough discovery in 2016, I think it was, the thing that allows you to pursue quantum processes that don't require big, expensive dilution refrigerators and some other equipment, and could possibly enable these processes to be put in phones someday and operating at room temperature.
Of course, no worries. I mean, one thing I just wanted to emphasize was when we talk about technology, we don't mean software, right? I mean, we mean like the physical stuff, like hardware. We mean stuff that you're used to touching, tangible things, right? So you use very complex setups, very complex instrumentation. You need people with very specific set of skills to build and develop and test and measure and do all these things with these kinds of technologies. So we're not talking about software, we're talking about hardware. Back in 2016, I was at Sydney Uni and I was working with colleagues of mine at EPFL in Switzerland. So that's the Swiss National Institute of Technology, so Swiss Federal Labs for Tech, and very bright people there. And I was looking at some new material that I'd made, and we found that it had the viability to be a qubit. And qubits are the basis of a lot of quantum technologies to do with computing, right? So you have this very unique material that at the time, when you think about it, if you go back, we published the work in Nature Communications, it's open access and you can have a read through it. And what we found in the field was, specifically in the quantum computing field, was you had this dichotomy that existed. Now, materials are the basis of all technology, right? They're the tangible physical basis of all technology. So they're very important, to say the least, when developing your technology, because somehow or another down the track, if you kind of extrapolate, they play a big part in, if you're going to commercialize your technology, the bounds that you can put on your business models, right? And the way that you commercialize your technology, believe it or not, right? So if we go back to the material at the core of people developing kind of solid state devices for qubits, you had this dichotomy that existed, right? Where if you wanted to do these these really cool physics to do with manipulating qubits and computations and things like this. You have to do it at really low temperature because that's when things just freeze out. And so you have to use these massive dilution refrigerators to cool things down to colder than outer space. And it was to do with the materials, right? The materials meant that you had to cool things down. And then there were these other classes kind of materials very broadly where you can do this stuff at room temperature. It was pretty cool, but it was very difficult to integrate these materials into modern day electronics. And so there was this gap between, well, how do you do this at room temperature, but then have something that could be integrated into electronics easily, right? And this is where this material kind of fit nicely, where you could potentially do all these wonderful things at room temperature and have a material that could easily integrate into modern electronics. And this was, a real, I would like to think, a paradigm shift in thinking, but also this opportunity now emerged where, you have this thought now where, hang on a minute, it's actually possible.
Okay.
And it's a similar thought that I found back in the days when I had made graphene. At the time, the thinking was, graphene is a single layer of graphite. Right? It's very important. Language is very important here.
Sure.
People were, being preached to that graphene was a single layer of graphite. So by reasoning, you could only make graphene from graphite. False, right? This is not true. But dare to challenge that ideology, right? So at the time, people were making graphene from graphite. And their idea of scalability was, I'll just peel more graphite, right? Now I came along and made it with alcohol. So all of a sudden, you had this mindset shift where, oh, wait a minute, if you can make it with alcohol, you can make it with graphite, well then perhaps you can make it with any carbon source. And then, the synthesis of graphene really just took off, right? So similarly here, with this kind of mindset shift, you either were embedded in this low temperature physics with materials for, quantum physics, quantum computing, quantum technology, whatever, or you had this idea around room temperature stuff where you were kind of limited to, materials that weren't really easily integratable in devices. And here we came along a few years ago and we said, well, hang on a minute. No, there's a possibility here where you can have the best of both worlds.
I see. There are lots of different ways to make qubits. You've got one that is, as you say, sort of challenging some ways that people have thought previously. Tell me about sort of advantages and differences of your approach to making a qubit, as you've just mentioned, versus some of the others like, photonics, trapped ions, anyons, and other weird and wonderful things.
Yeah, look, they're covering all different qubits, quantum information, right? It's what we have to kind of get our head around. Quantum information, to be able to control quantum information in different kinds of states, and here I'm going into jargon. The point is, you have systems, right, that are able or that allow you to, have some sort of control, and there's very set definitions around, what a qubit is, what a computation is, what quantum information is. So those people can look up, right? But the important thing to know is there's no silver bullet, right? There's no one way. In your modern day technologies, you have, silicon is pretty much underpins all the technologies that we use today, right? And transistors are the basis of your processing units, and you have memory devices and things like this. They're pretty standard now after 6-7 decades. That's what won, right? You have entire trillion-dollar industries built around these materials and devices, and, it's huge, right? Whereas in quantum computing and quantum technologies in general, that's not the case, right? So with qubits, if we're going to talk about qubits, it's not the case. You don't just have one type or one material or one technology or one device or one approach. There are multiple approaches, and there's nothing to say yet, whether one approach is going to win out over the other, much the same way as you don't use your laptop up to your phone, up to your ears, you just pick up your phone, right? So
sure.
Different approaches for different devices, different end users, different applications, still early days, very early days. In that regard, yes, you have people building technologies out from qubits in light and ion traps, superconducting materials, silicon, carbon, all sorts of things. I think it's quite exciting. But I want to take you back And you might ask yourself, well, why do we have transistors as being ubiquitous? And why is silicon so ubiquitous? Well, why? I mean, just in your mind, Brent, why do you think silicon is so ubiquitous? Why we use transistors? Why this 0, 1?
Well, it's a good question. I think because it was an easier thing to scale up and make an industry out of versus germanium, and silicon is everywhere. I mean, you go to the beach, you see a bunch of silicon. I mean, that simplifies things to a childish level, but
No,
but that's where I
I
operate.
mean, you're there, right? I mean, it was, okay, how do we translate Boolean logic? And how do we digitize Boolean logic? I mean, back in the days, you had punch cards.
Yep.
Right? So you had this technology or these materials or this approach where, it's kind of low errors, scalable, miniaturizable, you had materials that were abundant, and it worked. It doesn't mean it was the perfect solution. It doesn't mean it's better than germanium. It doesn't mean that it's better than gallium arsenide. It doesn't mean that. It just means that it ticked a lot of boxes, right?
Yep.
And at the time, I bet you, for those old enough to remember and those listening, that, there were mammoth companies around, right? And there were these little fledgling startups, with this new technology. Intel was just starting out selling memory devices and moving into microprocessors. Who in the world's going to buy a microprocessor, right? You started out with devices with 5 integrated transistors. Oh my God, 5, right? Now you have billions, right? And there were these huge multinationals. Oh, well, why wasn't Intel bought out, right? Why did Intel keep going down their path? Why did IBM keep going the way they did? And why did all these other companies do what they did at the time? Would we ever replace vacuum tubes? Who would have thunk it? And here we are today. And it's something where I've been in nanotechnology for almost half my life and at the forefront of science for longer than that. You always get this, right? You always get people say, it's never going to work, it's never going to be there. But I tell you what, you take their comments with a pinch of salt and you just get on with it. Because for me, what I found is it doesn't matter. Their opinion doesn't necessarily matter whether you can do what you can get done and what's needed to get done. Because ultimately, if you're right, and you get it done, right? Let's say all these people that are saying that quantum computing and technology is going to revolutionize computing, technology is fundamentally going to change in the future. There's always going to be naysayers, but what are they possibly going to say if it ends up working out? Oh, okay, it worked out. Thanks. But what would be the impact if the people working on these breakthrough technologies were to just say, you know what, I'm going to stop because you are a pessimistic person. Just going to put the brake on things. I don't believe it's going to happen. I can't comprehend what you're doing. I don't want to comprehend what you're doing. What we have works just fine. Thanks very much. Well, I'm very glad that a lot of pioneering companies today didn't take that advice decades ago.
Likewise. I mean, if you were to listen to pessimists, for one, you'd be bummed out all the time, and for two, you'd probably not get anything done because there'd just be so many reasons not to.
You ask anyone in the field. I mean, 10 years ago, if you told people working on quantum computing, this is going to be there's going to be commercial potential in this, you probably get people in the lab saying, look, it's pretty confined to the labs, I don't see it. 10 years later, you're looking at companies like IBM and others that are producing some amazing technologies. And you'll be surprised, look, apart from the people working at Archer, you'll be surprised just how many Aussies around the world are leading in this technology development.
Sure.
You're very surprised. So I encourage you to go out and just have a look at the people behind the work. And it's absolutely exciting to be in this space right now.
I don't doubt for a second it is, and
I must have wandered off from your question.
No, it's quite all right. I think that there was a coherent thread in there. We can move to the next question, and any digressions are wonderful and welcome. I wanted to ask, obviously you've gone through quite a few steps on the way to your goal, and you've got many more because it's a very hard thing you're trying to do, and progress is incremental and there are a lot of problems to solve. Could you walk the audience through some of the things you've had to prove so far?
I think just to set the stage, what I would like people to just kind of through this conversation throw out what they were taught about progression and progress, right? And that linearity that people assume comes with it, this serial nature of development, right? Technology and its development is a continuum, okay? And I think if Archer is successful along any point of this continuum, we have this opportunity to make a really big impact in this space, in quantum technology. And we have this opportunity to do that with a globally significant early stage technology that we're building here, right? So what we've had to do over the last few years was bring the people on board, but then technically we need to be able to drive the development of this technology. Without the technology, and I've said this many times, you have no chance at commercialization. You need to make sure that you get to the point where the technology works and that you can build out what you need to build out. And you do this, like I said, through a technology development continuum. And what we've seen over the years is we've done some amazing work, like get to a point where we can measure the conductivity through a single qubit material that's only about 100 atoms or a few hundred atoms across. And having access to the facilities and infrastructure and instruments and the talent to be able to do this in-house at Archer. And to work, you said, who do we work with? We work with multinationals, we work with universities, startups, R&D groups all around the world, the best and the brightest, right? And being able to access those facilities and work with those people to get stuff like that done at the very limits of what can be achieved has been phenomenal. And then progressing and fast forwarding to where we are today, when we say we want to be able to integrate our qubit material into modern day electronics, what does that mean? It means being able to take modern day circuitry, modern day foundry fabrication processes, modern day technology, and then somehow build our qubit into this and get it to work. That's hard.
Yep.
Right? So qubit architectures today are quite bespoke, right? They're tailor-made. And so you can't just throw them into an industry that's built off the last 6 decades, like I said, of innovation that's based around silicon and gallium arsenide and the others, and process lines that are CMOS-based and process lines that are hemp-based or process lines that are whatever-based.
Yep.
And then just magically think that you're going to scale up and everything's going to be okay. It doesn't work like that, right? So most recently, we were able to show that we could incorporate our qubit material into a CMOS device and detect the quantum information at room temperature. That's amazing.
Sure.
That was just, brilliant. Right? And we worked with our colleagues at EPFL to do this, and that was based off years of innovation. And to be able to demonstrate this means that what you'll find about Archer and our company is that we're not hype, right? We don't hype. We stay away from that nonsense. We really just say it as it is, right? If you read our ASX announcements, if you read whatever we go out with, you see it's very just clear cut to the point. This is what we've done. This is what it means. And for me, that was a massive achievement. And that was built as well. You take it into consideration that earlier this year, February, we also announced that we were able to incorporate the qubit material with a HEMT device, a high electron mobility transistor device. Now, these HEMT devices are found in your mobile phones, right? So here we are talking the talk, but walking the walk as well, right? So we've built out these HEMT circuits, put the qubit in it, measured, found that we can detect the quantum information at room temperature using a HEMT device, using CMOS devices, working with large Tier 1 semiconductor foundries now to tape out and work on potentially scaling these kinds of circuits. It's absolutely phenomenal. Where we were and where we are now, and it's absolutely wonderful to think about what's ahead.
Yeah, I can tell it gives you a buzz, and it should. You mentioned there's a lot of talent within your company and around you, and you're collaborating with, as you said, EPFL and multinationals. How important has ANFF Sydney been to your progress? Because I know you get some work done there, and there's a lot of bright folks and some good equipment there.
One thing I'm very passionate about, and what you'll find is, you talk about ANFF, the Australian National Fabrication Facilities, a bit of an umbrella kind of name. In Australia, we have very good facilities and infrastructure. I'm one of the people in the country that strongly advocate for what we have here in Australia. And there will be others that say, oh, we could always do, we can always do more. All right, I get it, right? But a couple of years ago, there was no research and prototyping foundry at the University of Sydney, right? Now there is. It's a $200 million purpose-built facility to prototype next-generation advanced devices, just the same way we're doing right now. Another ANFF node at UNSW with very, very advanced lithography instrumentation in there that we were able to use both at University of Sydney at the research and prototype foundry and also at the node at UNSW to develop these advanced lithographic processes to get Archer to go sub 10 nanometer in its fabrication, which is best in class around the world. So we have the facilities, I believe, here in Australia locally to do certain things very well, right? Especially around the development of advanced materials. Do we have foundries that are worth $50 billion that spit out millions of wafers every week, right? No, we don't, all right. But it's not to say that we never will. But at the same time, it's not to say that this industry can't flourish here. On the contrary, I think you'll find that there are a lot of people in the country passionate about growing the semiconductor technology industry in Australia, and ANFF is just a reflection, I think, of the years of hard work and push by many people around the country to give scientists, engineers, and others the opportunity to translate their brilliant ideas into technologies that can have real commercial impact around the world.
Right. Well, I've heard that said before, and I've also heard it said that the ANF team is working on the smell of an oily rag in a lot of cases, getting a lot done with not very many resources. And I'm not just saying that because they're being kind enough to be the series sponsor, but because there is a lot of love in the community that makes electronic devices for ANF and what it can enable. So
I had no idea this was being sponsored by ANF, but I can give you a day-to-day example of what we make.
Sure, go on.
I mean, our staff are able to actually handle these instruments. Number one, we're actually given the opportunity to be on the floor inside core research facilities that are being used by academics and multinationals alike. And the other thing is, because of ANF and because of the way that it's set up, we're also able to access the technical expertise that's required to induct our staff, train our staff, and facilitate the assistance to our staff in, troubleshoot and user experience. And that is very valuable. And it's something that you don't really get in other organizations around the world, right? And on top of that, the ability for Archer to keep its IP, right? So this, for an organizer, a company, right, that's not a university spin-off, a company like Archer, that is growing, to be able to access these facilities here seamlessly. Obviously, we have the right people to do it, right? We're not just sending in people that have no clue. I mean, we're sending in people that have been, that know how to use these instruments, right?
Sure.
But it's absolutely phenomenal what I see ANF and the larger ecosystem here in Australia and where it could be in the next 5 to 10 years.
And so you mentioned the importance of keeping your IP in Australia, and we all hope very much that can happen and that you get to the stage of commercial reality. If all things were to go well, would you also retain production here, do you believe?
You've asked a couple of things there, and there are some things that we just can't promise, right? Production, what do you mean by production? We don't have any massive foundries for full-scale manufacture here in Australia. Inevitably, we have to go abroad. But the one thing I just want to take a step back and just kind of let you know a little bit more about the industry we're operating in, the semiconductor industry. Unlike a lot of industries where value or greater value is derived downstream, right? So
sure.
the closer you get to the customer, the more money you make, right? So it's a bit of a simplified way. In the semiconductor industry, the greatest bit of potential value add is actually around the R&D area of the product life cycle. So this is why I think Australia is quite well positioned to take advantage of its strengths, right? We punch above our weight when it comes to, how many times have we heard this? We punch above our weight when it comes to R&D. That's great,
Constantly.
Right? We can turn that into something that's very valuable, right? I believe that. So in the semiconductor industry, I think we can position ourselves quite well. Now, you can see around the world, and I don't want to get to geopolitics, but no one company or one entity or sovereign or whatever has the ability to control the supply chain end to end, right? But it is critical to keep hold of that IP, right? IP in technology in the semiconductor industry is incredibly important. And if you look at the priorities of a lot of semiconductor companies, IP will be at the top of it.
Yep.
So, can't emphasize enough how important IP is. And IP, guess where it comes from, Brent?
I would say a person's brain.
Exactly, right? So it comes from people's brains. So we need people, we need bright people, we're very smart people to generate that IP so that we can protect it in the first place, right? Yeah, I can't agree with you more.
So, and I got to say, I do appreciate that making wafers and putting things on them, it's a value chain. There are all different parts to it, and production is not always going to be the thing that resides in Australia.
There's no one business model to govern them all, and there's no one approach to govern them all. It is a complex industry. It's $1 trillion industry. It's only second behind finance, the semiconductor industry. So, whichever way you look, it's a global industry with a lot of opportunity, and depending on where you play, there's opportunity there, I think, if you tick the right boxes.
To get back to the value chain, and there are a lot of different places on it. Where's a place within, or where are places within the semiconductor value chain that you think it would make sense for Australia to grow, and there is potential for revenue to be generated and to be captured here?
Look at where Archer currently operates, and we're not in, we don't represent everyone in the semiconductor industry in Australia, right? But where we currently operate is in the R&D and pre-R&D areas. But it's not to say that others don't operate in other areas. But it takes, if you want to expand beyond the design and R&D areas in Australia, and I know there's a lot of talk in Australia around kind of focusing on design stages and R&D stages and, these kinds of areas of the supply chain and IP.
Yep.
But if you have a look at, say, South Korea, right? And I don't like it when people kind of give up here in Australia. I mean, look, I've had a decent career over the last God knows how long, and I've met a lot of wonderful people, and I've had a lot of experience in governance so far in my life. The one thing that I really just detest is when people just give up before you've even had a chance to start, right? Oh, it's too mammoth of a thing, let's just move on to the easier option, right? Let's just go do something else. That really irritates me. So, for example, you might hear, it costs $50 billion to build a large-scale manufacturing plant for semiconductor chips, and it might cost $10 billion for another one. Oh my God, who's going to build that? Who's going to run that? Are we going to have utilization rates? Are we actually going to make money from it? Are we going to hire people? Can we get talent in? Oh my God, it's so difficult. It's so hard.
Yep.
If you actually have the people with the will to get this done, and you embed this at a high level, and you say, we're going to get this done, and it's going to happen, we'll get done. Look at South Korea. South Korea said, they set goals, they put it into their GDP, and they said, look, we're going to invest this much of our GDP over the next 20 years to build out the semiconductor industry in South Korea. Look at them now, right? So if there's a will, there's a way. And I think Australia is in a position where if we have the will, then we can carve the way for the high-tech industry in Australia. And I'm going to be, biased here and talk about the semiconductor industry. And, I think there's a massive opportunity here that we can, on all levels, state, federal, local, whatever you want to call it. I don't like getting too political, but there are opportunities here to really develop this industry out over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Pleased to hear that you think it can be done.
I'm a cautious optimist, right? That's the kind of person that I am. Yeah, for me, it can be done.
A more general sort of question about manufacturing. I'd just like to get your personal thoughts on why it's important Australia has a strong manufacturing ecosystem. It's kind of a stock question for this series.
I want to ask you a question first about this.
Shoot.
Do you think manufacturing is the lowest point of the value curve?
Well, it depends on your idea of what manufacturing involves, because I see it as something with a few different steps. Production's one of them. I think manufacturing is an important enabler, and I think if you let me go on, I'm just going to go ramble.
Is it from just high level? We're having a pub chat. Do you think if you were to just map out across, say, the technology industry, manufacturing is pretty much close to or the lowest point of value?
I would say no. I would say that the value of it stretches far beyond where it's appreciated. And I would say that there's a huge multiplier to it and an economic complexity angle to it and something beyond just the raw value that you might see if you look at a pie chart. So that's probably a bad answer, but that's my answer.
Look at the world today. You try and convince me that manufacturing on home soil is not important.
Right? I wouldn't attempt.
So, I mean, it took a global pandemic and a seismic shift in global supply chain disruption for us to realize that manufacturing was required on home soil. Come on.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot at stake here that's bigger than me, right? And if you have the option of having efficient manufacturing on home soil, and I say efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. So efficient manufacturing on home soil, you take it.
Yep.
There's no doubt about it. So for me, it's a no-brainer. But for others, must have grew up in a different time. But yeah, for me, especially now the world that we live in, you'd be hard-pressed to convince someone that manufacturing on home soil and that sovereign capability is not important, to say the least.
Yep, well, I think we can agree pretty strongly there. Let's sort of draw to the end of this chat because you've been very...
Brent, is it too late? Is it too late in your eyes, though?
To grow manufacturing? No.
To either, re-establish or maybe establish new types of manufacturing in Australia. Do you think it's too late? Do you think other countries are just well ahead of us?
No, I think that
they're well ahead of us.
I think
that people that you've spoken to.
Well, I'm going to sort of echo what a friend of mine says, and that's that we have plenty of high potential manufacturers who could, change the world potentially, and I could bore you with examples, but I think the main issue is getting them to scale. I think that's that. I think we have people with brilliant ideas, though they tend to be in companies that you just need customers and just need investors and just need to be valued. And I think that if we could get our culture to value them, then the world would be our oyster.
Thanks. We can go on to the next question.
I believe that's pretty much all that I wanted to ask you, Mohammad, and you've been very generous with your time, so I won't ask you too many more things, though I will offer you an opportunity to throw in a plug or make a closing comment of your choice. Floor's all yours.
Don't need to throw in a plug. I mean, we're publicly listed, so everything you want to know about the company and our progress, so it's all publicly available information. But I guess if there's one thing that I just wanted to share with everyone is this stuff is hard. It's complex. It's not easy. Things that we do at Archer, it's very difficult. And so the one thing I say to people is, in order for us to be successful, we can't let our ambition far exceed our talent. And that goes for many things. But, Archer, we have a lot of talent. So we can be pretty ambitious. So there's nothing wrong with being ambitious. So for us, that being ambitious, reaching our goals and developing these technologies that can have, a positive impact economically around the world over the next few years, which is just a fantastic position to be in.
Well, that's a very pleasant note to close on. And with that, I will thank you, Dr. Mohammad Choucair. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, have I?
Choucair, but it's all right.
Dr. Choucair, or we can just go with Mohammad. Mohammad, it's been a treat speaking to you, and I really appreciate you donating the time to be on AU Manufacturing Conversations.
Cheers, mate. Glad we have a chat.